Welcome to Explore More, where we explore all the stories from the Bible. And for this season, we're using the Clear Word and My Holy Bible. So you can go ahead, get your Bibles, and join us. Today, we are continuing our story about Noah. And so last week, we saw where God gave Noah clear instructions as to how to build the ark. And this week, we will be looking at all the people that influenced Noah while he built the ark. And so our story this week comes to us from Genesis chapter 7. And at this time, Zachary will read for us Genesis 7 verse 1.
Then the Lord said to Noah, "Come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation."
All right, so we see that in all the land, God only found Noah and his family to be righteous. And so the story shows us that Noah was preaching for 120 years, Sean. Have you lived 120 years?
No one to say.
No, but what do you think it's like preaching for so long?
Well, yes, Noah did preach for 120 years. Now, if I was preaching every day at a school for, let's say, 6 or 7 years, I'd have an impact on people. And I'd say that, yes, I'd be ridiculed and demotivated, but even though that would happen, I still believe that I should do it because in the end, there's a reward waiting for me.
Yes, there is a reward indeed, and Noah is a good example. 120 years of preaching the gospel, and yes, he was ridiculed, he was laughed at, but he kept on pressing, right, Carlisa?
Yes, Auntie Sarai.
And so the people, did you know that people helped Noah to build the ark? And
Yes,
they were
yes.
not saved? Yes. And so what do you think people's response would be to you, Carlisa, if you were preaching for 100?
Well, responses could either motivate you or bring you down. And, sometimes when you try to minister to others and it brings you down, it kind of doesn't really want you to do what you're doing anymore, because it's like what you say to them is what they tend to do more. But sometimes they just genuinely don't know the truth. And motivation, what they do, like when they listen to what you say and they respond accordingly and it motivates you, it kind of pushes you to do more and to, try and do your best. But although some people that heard what Noah was saying did not listen and did the opposite, Noah knew that God would spare him and would spare others that actually listened to him, and so he continued to preach.
And yes, that is a beautiful motivation. No matter what the response is, you know that God's ultimate plan is to save all of us. So if you have to preach 100 years, 200 years, you know that God wants everybody to be saved. And so, Zachary, if you were a son of Noah and you saw your father building this boat 3 stories high? 3 stories high. What would you do? Would you help him to build it?
Yes, I would.
Would you think he's crazy?
No, I wouldn't think he's crazy.
Why not?
Because we might not know what God has planned for us. And so I would have my trust and faith in him.
Right, and so his sons did put their trust and faith in Noah, and Noah had his faith in God. And sometimes we may not understand what God is doing, but when we see how God works in the lives of our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents, our uncles and our aunties, we know that we can trust God. Even if sometimes what he says to us sounds hard, it sounds impossible, God says with him all things are possible. And so that leads us to the point of faith and obedience. Right, Antonio? How does trusting in God build our faith?
Well, trusting in God builds our faith because based on experiences we've had before, those experiences or the experiences of our family and relatives will show us that we can trust them and show us that there will be a good, a benefit to trusting God.
That's beautiful. And even though we are young, God wants us to have a relationship with Him where He can show us that when we trust Him, He will come through for us. He has promised that He will protect us and that He will keep us safe, but He wants us to trust and obey Him. So, Carlisa, can you take us out of this one?
Okay, so I didn't have a text to really help me with this VIP, but what I would say is that God uses us to God uses our family members to influence us, and sometimes our family members might say things that kind of lower us down, but we should always remember that those who are faithful to God and those who obey God, there's always a reward in the end, and God will reward His people faithfully.
Thank you. And that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Trust God, and He surely will come through for you.